folks. I'm sorry, I'm trigger happy. I'm like, let's do this. All right, camera 4 beside me when you can. All right, Nicholas Groves, apologies for the pittance South African currency. Jim, please keep it up. You and your team ripping new ones impartially. Please reach out to retired Colonel Chris Wyatt, excellent analyst, will be a great guest. Thank you, Nicholas. Working for a living is a fake concept. Money is fake. Government fake. This whole system is a fake matrix. Solution, emancipate from mental slavery. SS. I love you, Jimmy, but the people risking their lives on the journey to come here work are welcome. Embrace them and reject the government. Tarek. Hey, Jimmy, thanks for speaking out for the vax injured. I'm a Pasadena-based paramedic who was forced to get the jab or lose my job. I now have 2 lifelong autoimmune diseases from it. It's my biggest regret. Ramblin', I'm sorry to hear that. Sparky, don't even leave a patch called Ukraine lest it remain NATO playground, carpetbagger, money laundry, and becomes a BlackRock property. In South Africa, if Biden sneezes, we get pestilence, not a cold. Nicholas. Sparky, make Ukraine Russia again. Reliquary, what is that? Reliquary Prime. If I send a $50 super chat, can I mute the next $50 worth of people asking about the silly exorcist? Go to church and leave the rest of us alone. We're all right. Thank you for your generosity, folks. Ristos, Jimmy Dore is my favorite comedian. Scott Ritter is my favorite weapons inspector, and I love Scott. Scotty's on fire. Sparky, Scott's been pro-Palestinian and anti-Zionist, so Israel probably had the State Department come down on Scott by spoiling his plans. John, can Scott explain his past? And he did, right, John? S.S. so much drama over something completely imaginary. Dollars. The whole world needs to wake the fuck up. One more. The U.S. is trying to spoil the St. Petersburg conference, but I wonder if it's also Israel had the U.S. State Department turn up the heat on Scott like they had Congress turn up the heat on TikTok. Sparky, thank you. Back to Jim Jam.
So guess what? You know, the NIH... the people who were funding the Wuhan
socialist medicine.
Yeah, the NIH scientists made $710 million in royalties from drug makers, a fact they tried to hide.
It doesn't sound very socialist.
So this guy, his name is Adam Andrzejewski, and it's pronounced Andrzejewski. Yes, it is. He is the CEO and founder of OpenTheBooks.com. It's the largest private repository of U.S. public sector spending. Their mission is every dime online in real time. In 2022, OpenTheBooks.com captured nearly all the public expenditures in the country, including nearly all disclosed federal government spending, 50 of 50 state checkbooks, and 25 million public employees' salaries and pension records from 50,000 public bodies across America. So that's a big deal, and that's who... So the new data from the National Institute of Health revealed the agency and its scientists collected $710 million in royalties during the pandemic from 2021 through 2023. These are payments made by private companies, big pharma, to license medical innovations from government scientists.
So you pay the government scientist's salary with your taxes for you, and then
the pharma.
Well, that doesn't sound like a conflict of interest. Why would anybody not trust the science in the
almost all of that cash, Kurt, 690 million of it went to the National Institute of Allergy and Infection Diseases. That's
the dog torture one.
That's the agency that's led by Dr. Anthony Fauci and 260 of its scientists. Or it was led by him until he recently resigned.
That money bought a lot of dogs and flies.
That's right.
That's right. Dogs.
Information about this vast private royalty complex is tightly held by the National Institutes of Health. My organization, OpenTheBooks.com, was forced to sue to uncover the royalties paid from September 2009 to October 2021, which amounted to $325 million over 56,000 transactions. We had to sue a second time with Judicial Watch as our counsel to pry open this new release. Payment skyrocketed during the pandemic era. Those years saw more than double the amount of cash flow to the NIH from the private sector compared to the prior 12 years combined. All told, it's over $1 billion. It's unclear if any of the COVID vaccine royalties from Pfizer and Moderna, the latter of which settled by NIH by agreeing to pay $400 million, is even included. So Pfizer and Moderna paid the NIH $400 million for the COVID vaccines. Is that even included in these numbers? The NIH isn't saying.
Nor should they have to.
Now, I'm going to guess it's not included. The American people have one last crack at getting some candor from Fauci, the face of our COVID response, when he testified. Well, I guess this is 2 days old, this article.
5 takeaways.
When I didn't see anybody really try to get answers from him on this. So he testified. I showed some of the testimony. I'll show a little bit more today at the House Select Subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic. There's plenty to answer for. He spent years scoffing at questions about, well, somebody did ask him. And I'm pretty sure he lied again because he's a pathological liar, Dr. Fauci. And he said he he said he made $126 in royalties.
Over 1,000 times over the course of years.
He spent years scoffing at questions about potential conflicts of interest between COVID policymakers who relentlessly pushed vaccines and recipients of private royalties. Now, he'll also need to account for bombshell emails sent by one of his deputies, which described in-house strategies to circumvent the Federal Freedom of Information Act. They haven't really made him. I've been watching.
Yeah.
And I haven't really seen anybody get him to act. The only thing they got him to admit was that all his masking and all that he said that I didn't say it was made up. I said it wasn't based on science, and it just appeared. So, but they're not getting him on this stuff.
You got to play a recording of him each time you talk to him.
That's right. Can't believe people don't show a video of him contradicting himself like we show on this show.
Well, the one time the guy did, the one guy where he goes, that'll get the ideological bullshit if they can't go to school. Oh, yeah. But that
wasn't him contradicting himself, right? That was just him saying something horrible. And
I
then
thought he said...
Then he could say, that's not what I was saying. That's the wrong context. Anyway, let's get back to this. Fauci won't be able to misspell words to evade scrutiny or have folks physically... He's getting away with it.
This is like shit, Bernie Madoff shit of like right? Or not Bernie Madoff. That in Fargo, he would change the license numbers on the cars.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Instead, cameras from around the world will be trained on Fauci, and he'll be answering for information he gave in a sworn deposition earlier this year. They're not really getting him. It's a chance to either come clean or further cement the public's perception of him and the NIH as secretive. Well, that's what is happening. Beyond this small cabal of scientists covering, he's even denying that he said that if you said the virus came from a Wuhan lab, he's denying he said that was a conspiracy theory.
It's racist.
He's pretending that he was always open to that. He's just lying. And there's nobody up there who's really going to get him because I think they all work for the same people.
Yeah, why he's just the
and
white
he knows
head on
this.
The pimple.
That's right. So they're up there just kind of making campaign speeches against Fauci. They're not really trying to nail him. Beyond the small cabal of scientists covering up discussions of the virus's origin, the NIH has consistently treated freedom of information requests like viral attacks on their own. No wonder, then, that we're plaintiffs in 6 ongoing FOIA cases. Characteristically, the NIH is still redacting pieces of the data that would help us more easily connect therapeutics with their government-paid inventors. So they're trying to figure out where these payments are actually going. Who invented the drugs and who's getting the money for them? For example, they refuse to show us the amount of royalties paid to each individual scientist. So we still can't entirely follow the money.
You're going to hear about UFOs before this. They're going to reveal the truth about spaceships.
That's right.
Before this shit.
In the meantime, Senator Rand Paul has sponsored the Royalty Transparency Act, which sailed unanimously through the committee process and deserves a floor vote immediately. There's plenty Fauci could do in the meantime, too. He could indicate he supports bills like Paul. Yeah, that's not going to happen. He could call on the NIH and the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention to voluntarily unmask the royalty paid. That's not going to happen. Then we can see whether their assistants have advanced that. Yeah, of course we know they're all scumbags. This idea that scientists are good people or that Bill Gates is some kind of a philanthropist instead of what he is, a megalomaniac who wants to control the world. Yeah, Mengele is another
scientist. Great philanthropist Mengele, you might
They're
recall.
all scientists.
He reminds me of him.
Fauci could also support fixes to the FOIA law that create real consequences for those who purposely... That's not going to happen. At minimum, he must apologize for the utter contempt. He's not.
No, and it's not. At minimum, it's
and the transparency war waged by his colleagues that's now been revealed in private. So it's been revealed that the people who work with Fauci, they knew they were covering up their communications about COVID and the vaccines and all that stuff. They were covering it up, and they were doing such unethical stuff that when someone searched for something, they would speak about it in code. And they would speak about it on private emails that they could erase. Among the government's most basic duties to the public are providing for the general welfare, reporting its income and spending. Well, that's not happening. So so I really appreciate this guy. Let me see. This guy, Andrew.
I want to open the books on why his name is pronounced like that.
Andrzejewski.
Yeah. So the DRZE is
often a W is pronounced like a V or an F. I'm pretty sure. But anyway, I appreciate, and I'm a fan of your pocket square and your super big tie, but and his cufflinks. He looks fantastic. He's very dapper.
Yeah.
But none of that happened. They had the hearing. They let him off the hook. They made some video. I'm going to show you another video.
Only Trump is convicted for a thing I couldn't possibly care about.
Right, that's right.
But this Mengele level, way bigger than anything Mengele did, this crime.
Yeah.
Ain't going to be nothing for this.
Nothing. Because the establishment's in on it. All right, over to Steph.
Okay, Sparky, build a better world with bricks. Thank you. Dear Scotty, it would be wonderful to have Scott Ritter account his experience as a UN weapons inspector so he can discuss his efforts to counter the weapons of mass destruction narrative. We had the receipts. Sparky, tell Scott Ritter the Stuttgart Stallions rule over the Kaiserslautern Raiders. Sparky, FOIA requests are like asking to go into the Forbidden Zone in the original 1968 Planet of the Apes. Roger Meadows, public banks replaced FDIC for credit unions / community banks. Thank you, Roger. Good to hear from you. Scott was one of the loudest voices rejecting the liar justifications for 20-year war. I recall they promised the feds would stop at nothing to ruin his life. Bastards fucking tried, but forgot he's a Marine. Seaweed. Anytime they want to frame you, they charge you with a sexual crime. Very American and surreal thing to do.
Okay.
Billy, Bobby, Italian Stallion here. Excited to see you Friday. Jimmy, back to Jimmy.
So I've showed you this video. You know Fauci's a big liar. He's constantly contradicting himself and getting caught in, but there's never a consequence. And I'll just show you this again. Here,
schools, if you
here he is lying about recommending lockdowns of schools. Here he is.
Schools, if you had to do it all over again.
Well, again, it's first of all, I didn't recommend locking anything down. You're asking me questions. You're talking about the CDC is the public health agency. Mm-hmm. I recommended to the president that we shut the country down. And that was a very difficult decision because I knew it would have serious economic consequences.
So he's not used to dealing in a crisis like this with social media. So now people get and here's a little bit more. I'm going to show the reason I'm showing you this is because a congressman read him the Riot Act and listed all his crimes. And
do you regret particularly the last one, the shutdown, the sweeping shutdown that some said made things worse?
No, I don't, Neil. And in fact, I think we need to make sure that your listeners understand I didn't shut down anything.
I recommended to the president that we shut the country down. And the only way to do that is by draconian means of essentially shutting down the country. We know that we can do that if we shut down.
Well, I think one of the things you really need to do, to the extent that you can shut down temporarily the country, I think is important.
Well, if I knew at the time that shutting down would have such a dramatic effect on controlling the spread, obviously we would have shut down earlier. There are those who say you shut down your destructive things by disrupting the economy. And others say, well, if you save so many infections by shutting down,
Why didn't you shut down 2 weeks earlier? But I don't regret saying that the only way we could have really stopped the explosion of infection was by essentially, I want to say shutting down. I mean, essentially having the physical separation and the kinds of recommendations that we've made.
You've been a big fan of Cuomo and the shutdown in New York. You've lauded New York for their policy. New York had the highest death rate in the world. How can we possibly be jumping up and down and saying, oh, Governor Cuomo did a great job? He had the worst death rate in the world.
No, you misconstrued that, Senator.
Okay. So the reason why I want to show you that is because this happened. This is Kim.com's calling it the fall of Fauci. COVID-19 is officially exposed as a U.S. government project, a virus engineered by U.S. scientists using a biolab in China for cover. The biggest crime against humanity killed more victims than the Nazi Holocaust against the Jews. Demand justice. So here we go.
No, actually, you're not allowed to speak.
Your time has
Take your
expired.
Starbucks with you.
Mr. Garcia, Mr. Raskin, you're out of line. Your times have expired. I now recognize Dr. Jackson from Texas for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Fauci, I have to say, I, as so many Americans, am deeply disappointed in your actions during a critical time in our nation's history while you were in key leadership roles as the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease and as the chief medical advisor to President Biden. Put quite simply, you failed miserably, in my opinion. Based on all we have learned during the pandemic and all that we have since learned through this committee's work, I believe your failures stem from both an effort of self-preservation, manifested by a series of lies and cover-up, and by a total failure of leadership. It was obvious to everyone that you and your organization, NIH, had a lot to lose if the American people were to discover that COVID-19 was most likely leaked from a lab in Wuhan, China, and that you, via EcoHealth Alliance and Peter Daszak, actually funded this research, and that this lab was actively and recklessly conducting gain-of-function research. As such, you did everything in your power to deflect and cover up this possibility. You even recruited others to help you in this effort. Unfortunately, this cost our country and the world valuable time that may have led to answers regarding the origin, may have blunted the spread, and would have almost certainly saved lives. While I think most of us have known all along what I just described, what I have been appalled to discover through sworn testimony to this committee is the level at which you and those that worked for you went to cover up the obvious. Just a few examples, and I know these have been touched on, but they're important for everyone to hear. Dr. Lawrence Tabak, former acting director of NIH, testified that under the generic definition that NIH did in fact fund gain-of-function research. This was based on a definition that was initially used by NIH and a definition that was abandoned and removed from the website in October of 2021 and replaced by a new, much more detailed definition with a much higher bar that you have since conveniently used to define gain-of-function testing and to deny what Dr. Tabak has since confirmed.
So what he's saying is that I've showed you that Rand Paul asked him twice if he funded gain-of-function research at the Wuhan lab, which we now know probably led to the virus. He said he didn't twice, and he just outlined how they changed the definition of what gain-of-function was. They took down the real definition of the NIH website, and they put up a bogus one. And so now he could deny it to Congress, like, no, well, if you look at this definition, we didn't do that. But then the head of the NIH just testified a week or two ago and said, yes, we funded gain-of-function research, completely contradicting him. So he's been caught a million different ways. And he's just recounting it. He knows he's been caught, but he also knows there's not going to be a price to pay.
Well, we're not going to go all the way to where the top, which would be the Pentagon, right?
The DARPA.
Dr. Jackson here ain't going to go against them.
That's right.
They're going to go against a fall guy who's not even going to take a fall.
He also said that EcoHealth Alliance failed to properly and promptly report that their research violated the terms of the grant, something that went completely unaddressed under your watch. Dr. Moran's, your senior advisor, who you have tried today to distance yourself from, but whose large volume of emails clearly demonstrate that you had a very close and personal relationship with, and who reported to you directly, has openly bragged about how he subverted FOIA requests. I remind you that the law requires you and your former organization to comply with Freedom of Information Act requests. It is not optional. If you or your employees or your organization that you oversaw were systemically avoiding transparency and illegally hiding or destroying documents that rightfully belong to the American people, then you should be criminally charged, and they should as well. In addition, Dr. Gregory Folkers, your chief of staff, also engaged in illegal practices in which he crafted messages using symbols instead of letters to avoid FOIA exposure. In an email, April 2020, from Dr. Morans to Peter Daszak, he says, quote, "There are things I can't say." Well, I wonder what he couldn't say.
I wonder.
He also went on to say, quote, "Except Tony is aware, and I have learned there are ongoing efforts within NIH to steer through this with minimal damage to you, Peter, and colleagues, and to NIH and NAID," end quote. And then a few days later, he said, quote, "I have reason to believe that there are already efforts going on to protect you," end quote. In February of 2021, Dr. Morans wrote to Boston University scientist Gerald Kirsch saying, quote, "I learned from our FOIA lady here how to make emails disappear after I'm FOIA'd, but before the search starts. So I think we are all safe," end quote. Dr. Fauci, I want to know what you were being protected from and what you needed to be safe from. I'm going to go on because I have a little time here.
You're doing a great job.
He went on to say, quote, "Plus, I deleted most of the earlier emails after sending to Gmail. Once again, illegal and an actual crime." Dr. Morans noted in another email to Dr. Kirsch saying, quote, I learned the tricks last year from an old friend, Marge Moore, who heads our FOIA office and also hates FOIAs," end quote. It is absolutely amazing to me that Dr. Morans and Marge Moore still have jobs and our taxpayers are still paying their salaries. Dr. Morans wrote to...
So what he's describing is what Fauci's top assistant and the person in charge of the FOIA requests at the agency he's the head of, talking about subverting the law.
Our FOIA lady
and
that
hiding
hates FOIAs.
And that's right, and hiding stuff. And why would you have to hide stuff?
Because you're so stupid and cattle.
Because you're doing illegal stuff and you're creating viruses that, according to them, killed millions and millions of people.
Wait, who's powerful enough to protect a guy that powerful, I wonder?
Dr. Daszak in April of 2021, quote, "P.S. I forgot to say there is no worry about FOIAs. I can either send stuff to Tony on his private email or hand it to him to work or at his house. He is too smart to let colleagues send him stuff that could cause trouble." End quote. Apparently, you neglected to surround yourself with equally smart individuals. Dr. Morans wrote to another collaborator, Peter Hotitz, in June 2021, at Baylor College of Medicine, that he had deleted all his emails related to COVID origin when, quote, "the shit hit the fan," end quote. He said, quote, "I feel pretty sure Tony were too. The best way to avoid FOIA hassles is to delete all emails when you learn the subject is pretty sensitive." In October 2021, Dr. Morans wrote to Peter Daszak, quote, "Peter, from Tony's numerous recent comments to me and from what Francis has been vocal about over the past 5 years, we are trying to protect you, and they are protecting their own reputations as well," end quote. I'll just jump ahead. The American people can rest assured that we are going to continue to pursue answers, and we continue to push for full accountability from you and your colleagues despite continuing efforts to try to cover this up. Dr. Fauci, history will not be kind to you, and you will be known as the man who put his personal interests before the interest of the American people.
I can only hope that's true. I can only hope that history is not kind to Dr. Fauci, but you're going to need CNN, MSNBC, ABC, Fox News to report this, and they're not. They're not reporting. Well, Fox News is actually, they're showing the hearing.
Jimmy, I'm shocked that Peter Hotez, it turns out, was in on it. Dr. Hotez?
The very people that you were supposed to be protecting. Your actions, along with several others we have had before this committee, have completely eroded America's trust in our public health system and the agency that you represented for half a century. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired, and now...
And just so you know, he's been talking about this gain of function. So, that's just some of the lies. That's just some of the lies and illegal activity that everyone now knows that Dr. Fauci committed. That anyone who wants to know knows. Put it that way. But there's still people out there like that Harry Nissen kid who did an idiot test where he tweeted out, "Anybody think that Dr. Fauci, how many people here think that Dr. Fauci's a hero?" And he got over 30,000 likes.
You think those are real likes?
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, that kid, those are artificially
I thought I would bring that perspective to the topic today, is the issue of pandemic preparedness. And if there's one message that I want to leave with you today based on my experience, and you'll see that in a moment, is that there is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak. And I hope by the end of my relative...
How do you know there's going to be a surprise outbreak? That's why it's called a surprise.
Do aliens run our thing?
So that's this guy saying...
What is going on?
For him to be able to say that, if you were any kind of investigator, you would go, oh, that guy's planning to do something. How else would he know there's going to be a surprise outbreak? Then it's not a surprise if you can predict it. And of course...
There's going to be an outbreak in the future, you mean?
So
no, a surprise outbreak.
And so the theory is that some people are saying that they released the virus so they could get their mRNA thing through, because we've got other videotape of him saying that. Just because it's the flu, we have to make people afraid of it. I wish I had that video to show you that. And I wish I had that video, but I don't have it loaded today, but I do have it. And he said, well, it doesn't matter if they're not afraid. We have to make them afraid, and we have to make them take this new. And so a lot of people are saying they did this. They were funding this gain-of-function research, creating this virus, releasing it. And then the dual purpose was that they can then just make up out of thin air that you had to lock down and social distance, which is what they did. They made it up out of thin air. There was no science behind that ever. Fauci himself admitted in front of Congress that just appeared and that there was no science behind it. And why would they do that? So then you have to do mail-in ballots. So there's all kinds of so there's all kinds of control stuff happening. And it all stems from him saying there's definitely going to be a surprise outbreak. What the fuck?
Is this on his Disney documentary?
So
Disney Plus?
I don't know where this is from.
Dr. Fauci.
And so when he was actually deposed, he didn't answer any questions. And here's the guy who actually deposed him. Listen to what he says.
By the way, when you deposed Dr. Fauci, how many times did he happen to say he didn't know or couldn't remember?
He said, I do not recall or variations thereof 174 times, and adding in variations of I don't remember at least 212 times.
Wow. Smartest man on the planet couldn't remember 212 times?
He couldn't remember things, including things that he had told the national media, quote, I remember it very well. Then he would say 16 times, I don't recall details of that meeting.
Now you, you were near the top of your class at Harvard Law School, Rhodes Scholar, is that right, Mr. Sauer?
I've submitted a biographical statement.
Yeah. Well, I looked at your biography. It's pretty impressive. Is that pretty high? You've done a lot of depositions. You've done a lot of legal work. You've deposed a lot of people. Is 212 times pretty high?
I've taken dozens of depositions. I've never seen anything like it, including in this case where other federal government witnesses frequently profess inability to recall.
So the guy who told us all these things, who's, the smartest man on the planet, he set a record. Highest you've ever seen and couldn't recall, didn't remember.
I've never seen anything like it.
Okay, page 4 of your testimony.
And I have very small glasses.
That's who he is. That's who Anthony Fauci is. And I just hope that Kim.com is correct when he says this is the fall of Fauci. And now, if you want to know, you know that he's a criminal and a psychopath. If you want to know, I have to remind people that there's a movie called The Dallas Buyers Club. Matthew McConaughey won an Academy Award for that. Do you remember what that movie was about? It was about the government suppressing treatments for AIDS that were effective and cheap. And so people were dying when they didn't have to. And who was the guy doing that? Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci was the bad guy in the Dallas Buyers Club.
He's been there that long.
And wouldn't it be nice if Matthew McConaughey came out and reminded people of that? Yeah, he's been there. Oh, yeah.
Just if he was here of a psychopath
the
whole time.
He's been here. He's been since the 80s. He's been the head of the NAID.
Before that.
So he was the one who oversaw AIDS. He made people afraid of it. You could get it from casual contact.
Hugging you.
Yes.
He really wants everybody 6 feet apart, huh?
The gay community broke into his office building, and they had his head on a stick. They literally had his head on a stick. People, that's all been memory hold. You never see that on TV news and never talked about in the Washington Post or the New York Times. or my other cowardly comedians who host shows that pretend they're news shows, and they never talk about any of it. They never talk about any of it. The biggest scandal in the history of their life. People who do shows about exposing government secrets never once fucking mention any of this. So I hope Kim.com is right. I hope Kim.com is right that this is the fall of Fauci. Because as Neil as Neil Oliver said, he's not going to stop talking about it. He's not going to let people forget. I'm not going to let people forget. Those people who got COVID wrong and were for mandating people with experimental treatments and slandered my name as an anti-vaxxer, those people want to memory hole what they did during COVID. I'm not going to allow that to happen.
I wish I never got any shots so much. I wish so bad that
I'm so angry that I got it.
I didn't understand the level of...
I didn't either. And there were a lot of people who knew. I wasn't one of them. It wasn't until I looked into it after I got vaccine injured that I found out they were lying about everything and that this guy was at the head of everything, and he's a psychopath criminal.
I talked to friends in New York who got
boosters this year. Boosters this year.
New York is one of the dumbest places on earth now.
My old roommate got his booster. He's proud of it. We were at his Christmas party.
You get it. You're so dumb.
So over to Seth.
Well, let me tell you. If I were Rabbi Shmuley and diddle 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 digga digga diddle diddle dum, all day long I'd diddle little bums. If I were a Shmuley man, I'd peddle all my dildos, dreidel dildos, selling dildos with my daughter and her mum. If I were a Jewish Shmuley man, I'd be digging with a dildo in my bum. I'd wear a grotesque nose and go grab some goyim right on the nipple with a pinch. A Shabbos lap dance brace for the youngest mensch.
At this time, more than any other time, you know, revolution is necessary. It is necessary. Not only based on what has happened with the MOVE organization, you know, the babies that have been murdered, you know, MOVE adults that have been murdered, bombs being dropped on us, but past that to what is happening with all black people, so-called minority people, you know, money poor people. You know, this government, as has been said earlier, has waged war on us. But you know, something about us, particularly here in America, we don't really understand that. You know, we don't really know what war is. You know, for black people, for poor people, that people see as good, that they wasn't forced to do, that they didn't do to try to keep black people appeased, and calm down so that black people wouldn't riot. A prison situation is a crystallized example of that. You can make phone calls in prison. They have movies in prison. But they don't have those things because they just want to be nice to prisoners. They have those things because they know damn well if they don't have, people being able to contact their family, if they don't have, facilities for people to sit there and watch movies, people are going to be frustrated, upset, and they're going to direct that frustration at them prison administrators. And they're going to have riots on their hands. They're going to have people in them prisons turning them prisons out. That's why they have movies. That's why they have access to phones the way they do. And a stop to it when we don't like it, or encouraging it when it's something that's in our interest. We have to call the shots. The people have to take the reins of this system and start dictating, what we need, what needs to be done. And, taking the initiative to do it ourselves. We can't rely on this system. I mean, don't people see what's happening? Every single confrontation that MOVE people have been involved in, every single issue, oppression, economic issues, every single issue facing our people, is something that can be dealt with very, very simply. All people got to do is make their wishes known. All people have to do is stand up and say, listen, we're not accepting that. Unity is the key. Unity is the key to revolution. Revolution ain't nothing to be afraid of. It ain't nothing to shy away from. Revolution, contrary to what officials, this system and those backing the officials running this system, want people to believe that revolution means violence, means blood in the street. I'm saying it can get to that point, but it don't have to be violent. When people come together and take a strong stand on an issue, this government don't have no choice but to listen. Where you think they get their authority from? They don't have no power, but they do have authority to do certain things. Where you think they get it from? They get it from us, from the people. They get it from us accepting the things that they do to be done to stop it. Then you have some people who want to then turn around and say, yeah, well, it's the best we have, and want to make excuses. The time for excuses is over. It's over. Every man, woman, and child has to be involved in this revolution. Not only has to be, but is, whether you want to be or not. I mean, our babies gave their lives for this revolution on May 13th. Men, women, and children were murdered. And not just MOVE babies. What about all of the young men, women, children 8, 9 years old shot down on the street by cops, by drug pushers? I mean, where do you think that mentality comes from? It comes from this system, from the mentality of this system of getting over, making a quick buck, I'm saying that's where that needs to be done to stop it. Then, what I want people to really, really understand is that it's past time. It is past time for poor people, black people, to realize that this system has failed you. It has failed you. You can't get nothing from it. And what people got to do is withdraw our support from it and start doing for ourselves. That's what we got to do. How long are people going to sit back and beg, this government to do what's right when for hundreds of years, all you've gotten is a slap in the face. All you've gotten is this government kicking your ass. That's all. That's all black people have ever gotten from this government.
Hey, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there for more AM Joy and the rest of MSNBC. And click on any of the videos right here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. And you can get more videos from MSNBC for free every day with our newsletter. Just visit